Welcome back again, everyone, to the Fond Pod, the Fondcast. It's friends occasionally not disagreeing. This is Cody, and I'm continuing my summer series of the watch through of the James Bond films. We're up to film number 4 in today's episode. This is based on the movie Thunderball from 1967? 65. Apologies. 1965. This is the fourth movie in a row with Sean Connery, and it has some interesting things going on here as well. I happened to stumble while I was checking up some brief notes for today's episode that some people were asking, apparently in Google, if Thunderball is the best of the Bond films. And pre-warning to my score today, if you think this is the best of the Bond films, yikes. As mentioned, I haven't seen a lot of these as we're going forward here. Definitely have never seen this one before to this point, so may have some thoughts to share as we get into this. Okay, so as we pick up here with our rating system that we've been working with all summer long, we are again checking the movie Thunderball for the 7 criteria listed here: the title, the theme, music of the movie, the portrayal of Bond, the women in the movie, the villains in the movie, the plot of the movie, and the action of the movie, with a little bonus thrown on here for your favorite line, or my favorite line, I guess, as it were, from the film. So, Thunderball, let's start with that title. Maybe I missed it somewhere as this was going on, but I didn't know what the hell Thunderball meant. I had to look up what it referenced, which was apparently a mushroom cloud from a nuclear device going off, which is the plot of the movie. And apparently in the movie, they call the MI6 side of this caper Operation Thunderball, but I must have missed that in the actual film. That being said, I didn't know what the title meant, and I didn't hear him say the title in the film. So of the 4 so far, this one did not hit with me at all. Maybe not what I would have gone with on this one. Not sure what I would have called it, but Thunderball seems to exist as like a catchy buzzword, which doesn't necessarily fit most of this movie, sadly. Tipping my hand here a bit, but I'm going to give the title on this one a 2 out of 5. Worst title so far, especially as far as how they relate to the movie so far in our watch through. As far as our theme in this one, the ever popular James Bond themes, we have a movie title here called, of course, Thunderball is the name of the song in this one. And it felt a little bizarre to me because it kind of felt like it was forced. If you check the lyrics of this, it's basically like finding words that we can rhyme with Thunderball, and seems to be the word all over and over. Tom Jones is tasked with singing this one, and Tom Jones has a fine voice. He's a legend for a reason. I just don't feel like this one really worked necessarily, other than he had to say a few lines just to find something to rhyme with Thunderball, which maybe I'm already a little biased of because of the title, but it just didn't seem to work here in the theme song either, oddly. So I'd give this like a 6 out of 10. It's serviceable. It's not one of the better ones along this list, thinking of what's to come yet, or even really the ones we've had so far, with the iconic intro Bond theme and Goldfinger, obviously, from the last one, or even the From Russia with Love theme was better than this. So 6 out of 10 is my theme score here for this one. We're off to a rocky start already as we go through this. Let's talk about the portrayal of Bond in this film. 15 points awarded for the portrayal of Bond. Sean Connery, as I mentioned, is back for his 4th installment in a row now. They're churning these out fairly quickly. I should point out here as well. And I think I mentioned in the last episode, there was some behind the scenes chatter that Sean Connery really felt kind of locked into this contract. And I wouldn't say he like phones it in this episode or this installment, I guess. But he didn't really seem to be having fun. He didn't seem to be trying as hard with a lot of things. Maybe it was the plot of this movie just didn't give him a lot to do. We'll get to that in a minute, but I don't know. He just seemed like he was off a little in this one. Still very Sean Connery-esque. He was still very, confident in some scenes. Other scenes, he kind of seemed like he'd rather be elsewhere, though. I'm going to give this a 10 out of 15 for his portrayal of Bond in this one. He does do a lot of stunts on his own in this, or at least I presume because of the lack of special effects in the 60s. So I have to give him credit for that, if nothing else, along with some action sequences, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. And yeah, 10 out of 15 sounds just about right for this one, for the portrayal of Bond. On to our fourth category, cruising along in these first five here. The women in this movie, the ever popular Bond women. There were a few that I considered in this. There is the evil lady in this film, the name of Fiona Volpe. And there's also a couple smaller women that are kind of like the beginning of the movie, etc. But probably the biggest Bond girl, if you will, in this one is a character by the name of Domino Derval. And this was, let me pull it up here, played by Claudine Auger. Pretty good looking chick, I must say. If I'm allowed to say the word chick, apologies on that. But she's pretty good looking. She doesn't get a lot of screen time though, and what she does have is very like damsel in distressy slash, well, that's not even the right term. She's just kind of kept under lock and key for most of this movie by the villains. Rarely gets a chance to blossom. Rarely gets a chance to do much, save for the final scene on the boat, which I'll talk about here in a bit. But she doesn't do a lot. There's not really the connection as there was for, arguably any of the women so far in this series. Honey Rider, Tanya, and Pussy Galore all have had bigger roles in their movies, more important to the plot, more important in terms of interactions with James Bond, etc. So Domino was serviceable, but not great. 8 out of 15 for our Bond girl in this film. Okay, Villains is up next for 10 points. We have number 2 from Spectre, and we are again kind of treated to this hierarchy of the bizarre ordering system, I guess, of the agents of Spectre. And Largo is the name of the villain here, aka number 2, who was tasked with stealing some bombs, which we'll talk about in a second. It has a couple good speeches, has a couple good scenes, but in general, I didn't find him to be a very interesting villain. Also didn't really do a lot of stunts himself, save for some of the scuba diving at the end. And, there were definitely enough shots that who knows if that was the villain or a stunt double, I guess, as far as the actor. But it just wasn't really all that interesting, if I'm being quite honest. For a number 2 in the organization, you think they would have picked somebody with a little more charisma, a little more stage presence, if you will. They've still kept under wraps the number 1 of Spectre, whoever's calling the shots. That has not been divulged yet to this point in the movie series. So that's still a secret. It really just kind of bland, if I'm being honest. I'll give Largo or number 2 a 5 out of 10. Like, was there, existed for the purpose of the plot, but again, nothing to write home about. All right, well, through those first 5, if you're listening and paying attention at all, you might be thinking to yourself, it's not doing so well so far, and that's accurate. But maybe it can redeem itself here with the plot and the action. Let's find out. 30 points for the plot, because the plot of the movie should probably be the most important thing. That's why I have that weighted so heavily. This is, in summary, a bomb theft slash, what do we want to say here? Spectre hijacks 2 atomic bombs and basically tries to hold NATO at ransom by saying they want, I believe, $100 million or pounds or something like that. I don't remember which, because they were threatening both the United States and Great Britain with blowing up their cities with these bombs. There's some interesting things here at the beginning of the movie where we do get like a pilot that is essentially killed and replaced by an agent who has had their face surgically altered so that they could fill into this role. that was kind of interesting. We have a long sequence here at a health resort early in this movie where Bond is basically just seducing the crew of the health resort while Spectre also happens to be at this health resort, killing some few people and stashing some bodies there as well. But long story short, they end up with the bombs off the bomber. This one's going to take place mostly in the Bahamas, so we're switching, to another exotic locale. We have Spectre stashing the plane in some shallow water and camouflaging a plane at the bottom of the ocean, which is kind of novel. I've never really thought of somebody doing that before, putting like some fake seaweed and stuff on top of a net and then putting that over top of the plane. So there's that. Meanwhile, we have Bond taking on some of these lower level Spectre agents who are attempting to take out Bond for interfering with some of the schemes that are taking place for these bombs. Bond eventually comes back to London in this one, where we see, I believe, the first meeting of the entire franchise, where we have all of the 00 agents who are back together in one place. They're being told of like what their respective mission is going to be in an attempt to try to stop Spectre within the 7 days they're given to find the ransom money. And Bond essentially is talking to M, who's in charge, and says that he wants to go to the Bahamas because there was contact here made with Derval's sister Domino. This would be the girl of the movie, as mentioned. And so he thinks he can find her and, kind of zoom in on the dead pilot who is also alive with the surgical alteration. So we have Bond meeting up with Domino, and he finds out that she is not only the sister of the guy who has been replaced, but is also the mistress of Largo, who is, at a casino. And Bond, a little preview here of future movies. Bond plays some hands of cards against him, and, they have varying degrees of success against each other, but they both know who the other person is, right? So it's like we as the viewer in this one actually get a little bit of tension because we know one works for Spectre, one works for MI6, and they both know who the other person works for as well. So it's kind of fun. We get Q, who I haven't talked about either. So M and Q here, kind of like the mission planner and then also the tech guy, giving Bond some new things here to help find where the plane might be, where the bombs might be. We have some mini breathing apparatuses for under the water. We have some infrared cameras, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he finds that there's a hatch beneath Largo's ship that in reality, we know as the viewer, they've been taking, things in and out of that hatch, including the bombs and other little vessels, as well as scuba divers. But they don't know that in the movie yet here. So we have a celebration that's taking place on the Bahamas, and pretty tense scene here where Bond seduces, I guess, or so it seemed, and stays the night with Fiona Volpe. And she even makes a nice little speech, actually, which is where she says this is the part where, usually you seduce the lady and she falls for you and then she helps you beat Spectre, but not this time. And so that is true. So they chase through the streets all through this big celebration. Not sure exactly the name of that celebration. It's like the United Nations parade or something. They have, banners and floats and everything for dancers. But Bond does manage to escape, only to have Spectre catch up to him yet again. And as he is dancing with Volpe on the dance floor, she tries to distract him while someone kills Bond, but he notices it at the last second and spins around, and she is the one that's killed instead, and the Spectre agents run off after she is killed instead. So, meanwhile, we have Bond finding the plane finally, and then telling Domino that her brother was already killed by Largo, and she agrees to help try to find the bombs and help him with the mission and try to get revenge on Largo. We get the bombs in quite an extensive underwater battle scene. I really can't think of many movies, period, to 2023 that have had such an extensive underwater battle scene. Like, there were probably 30 agents of, I don't even know if they were NATO or MI6 or the Coast Guard or all of the above, taking on Spectre, who had just this huge crew underwater, and it's all done with scuba equipment, all practical effects. We have, people being speared, people being knifed, their masks being ripped off, their breathing tubes being cut. We have sharks coming into the area and attacking. We have all sorts of things going on. As I'm watching this, I have to think to myself, like, we talk about the fragility of the ecosystems and coral reefs and things of this nature now, and we're blaming, the bleaching and acidification and everything on global warming. And watching this scene and how much crap falls to the bottom of the ocean, I have to wonder if it all happened right here in this movie. That's maybe where it all started at. A lot of stuff falls to the bottom in this. I mean, spear guns and masks and flippers and bodies and underwater vessels and all sorts of stuff is crashing and all over the place. I also had to wonder the scene where they shot the shark with a spear gun and there was like blood coming out of it, if that was legit or not, because I don't know when PETA's influence came into movies. I would guess not at this point yet. So I have to wonder if a shark really did bite the bullet here for that one shot. Should be pretty crazy in 2023, but there we go. Okay, as Bond jumps on the deck of this ship that Largo is captaining, the ship splits in half, and the front half turns into a hydrofoil, goes even faster. And they're going as fast as they can to get away from the Coast Guard or NATO or whoever this is that's been chasing in the water. And I have to laugh at this because there is a scene where Bond is like, oh, this waiter was coming up to give Largo like a drink or something, but secretly was probably coming to kill Bond when he saw him. And Bond's solution to this is to make the boat go faster. Because apparently when they were trying to outrun the Coast Guard, they weren't already going as fast as they could. So, just a tiny little error there. Also, there were a lot of scenes underwater where the sound was not what the sound would be underwater as well. There were some dull thuds, cracks, and things of that nature, but there was like a sound of metal creaking and very loud explosions and things, which did not sound right for being underwater. But again, in a movie, you're trying to emphasize things to the audience. So Largo gets the upper hand on Bond in our big scene here towards the end. And just as he's about to shoot Bond, Largo dies because Domino snuck up from behind and shoots him with a spear gun in revenge. All right. And then we get another kind of bizarre little thing at the end here where a scientist who helped Domino escape and Bond and Domino jump overboard before the ship crashes into a reef and basically blows up. And as soon as they jump overboard, only Bond and Domino are there, and a plane flies overhead and drops an inflatable raft, which they hop on, and then eventually hop on a rope that is lowered from a plane, and they actually fly up in the air dangling from this rope, which just seems like about the worst way you could possibly rescue someone. So a few water sounds towards the end. The speed, it doesn't really make sense here at the end. And then we also have this third person, the scientist, who just disappears. Maybe he died. Maybe suddenly Domino doesn't care, and maybe Bond didn't see him. We'll just assume the best of both of them, right? Right. So at its core, this is just basically a theft movie by the bad guys and a threat to use these bombs. There's a lot of water action in this one. I'm not a huge fan of underwater action or water action scenes in general because so much can go wrong or look hokey. The scuba scenes in this movie should be commended because they really did try to do a lot with those scenes. And, for the most part, they came off okay. But it's kind of a small plot in terms of like just variety and in terms of like intrigue. It's basically like bad guys capture bomb, hide bomb, good guys try to find bomb, end of movie. There just wasn't a lot of twists and turns here. There wasn't a lot of surprises, which I definitely appreciated in some of the earlier films I've already reviewed here. So I'm going to give this a 15 out of 30. Just wasn't a great, I don't know, wasn't a great plot. Again, we're in the 60s. I can definitely see why, nuclear bomb tension is going to be at an all-time high. Atomic bomb tension makes sense why they would choose that as a topic, but just felt kind of not exciting for me here. Maybe that's a generational thing, or maybe that's a decade thing. Action in the movie, well, as mentioned, it seemed like Bond was not entirely into a lot of the stuff here in this one. But as I also mentioned, there was some other good scenes here where we did have, some good hand-to-hand combat. We had a couple shootouts in this one. And I really do want to commend them for the large-scale scuba battle towards the end of this movie because it was really a lot to try. They could have had four people versus three people underwater, but they had legions of people down there doing their thing. And that was actually one of the more visual moments of the movie, I think. Actually looked kind of cool, set itself apart from some of the other films in this franchise where they haven't really done underwater or things. So I'm going to give action a 10 out of 15. Passing grade on that one. It was pretty decent. Okay, and then favorite line before we go into overall thoughts here, we have, well, it's tough on this one, but there was a great part where Bond was on the beach filling in Domino about the plan and about her brother, and a henchman of Largo sneaks up through the trees, I guess, essentially up to them, and she said to Bond, Domino says to him basically that he's over there behind them. And Bond very casually, in one motion, picks up a spear gun, turns, fires, and drills a dude right through the chest into a tree. And then, of course, says, I think he got the point. Punrific again. So many good puns in this one and in these franchises. Okay, so that is going to take us to 10, 15, 5, 8, 10, 6, and 2. This is going to be a grand total, ladies and gents, of 56. So when I started off by saying I found it interesting that some people on the Google search, as soon as you type in Thunderball, have it as Thunderball, the best Bond movie, ? That pops up because this was easily the worst of the four movies so far in my book. It's going to fall distinctly into last place here, and just, I mean, really, if you look at the gaps, this was a more bad movie than the good movies were of good movies so far. If you want to think about it that way, this was, in other words, notably worse than the other ones that were the best were notably better. So this is my first official crap rating for one of the Bond movies, and I do get worried here because I know some of these next movies, as I mentioned, for quite a stretch, are known to be a little cheesy and not so great. So we'll see if this is going to be a continuing trend, or maybe I'll even like them. I don't know. I'm probably in the minority in saying that From Russia with Love is better than Dr. No and Goldfinger. But that's why I'm doing my own ratings as I go through all these. Yeah, it's interesting. This one really felt like Sean Connery's weight behind the scenes played into his character. And, maybe they phoned it in a little too quickly as far as just kind of capturing the Cold War tension and atomic bombs and things of that nature, all of which are fine for a movie, but it just felt like, in this one, they really quickly were like, hey, bad guys steal bomb, threatened to explode it unless they get ransom money. Bond chases after them. And then the only really thing they did that was interesting was they had the one pilot be killed and had somebody else take his place. I mean, there were no interesting henchmen in this one. There was no interesting habits that the villains had. I guess he did have a shark love, I guess, if you will. He had a shark tank at his house, but even that was kind of like, meh. I didn't find him to be particularly interesting as a villain. The women didn't get a lot to do in this movie. I mean, it just seemed like this one was off a little bit more. I did read that there was some behind the scenes drama that Thunderball was supposed to be the first Bond film, and it wasn't. And man, I don't know. I kind of think it was good for them that this wasn't the first one because I'm not sure the franchise would have captured as much attention other than being maybe different than what else was going on in the cinemas at that time, as far as scale and just an action movie in general. But yeah, this one gets the crap rating for me. Lowest score so far with a 56. All right, the next film I have up is going to be something I really kind of have always had a curiosity about, and that is we're going to watch the original Casino Royale from 1967. This is the next one theatrically that's released. This is the crazy one with Peter Sellers and Woody Allen. Ursula Andress is back as a character that is in one of the much later movies as well, Vesper Lynn. And this is going to be a really interesting one. David Nevins, I think, is James Bond in this, and I've heard it's more goofy. Well, the fact that Woody Allen's playing James Bond's like nephew is probably going to be goofy enough, but it's going to be one of those two non-Eon films that I mentioned. So I'll definitely take a look at that one with wide eyes and an open mind to see what that's going to be all about because I have no concept how that is. And then I also read, interestingly here, Thunderball essentially is kind of the plot for the movie Never Say Never Again, which is the other non-Eon film in 1983, starring Sean Connery in his return. So this is going to be kind of interesting as well as far as how this movie is branching in so many different directions, I guess, and has so many ties to some of these other films. So we got Casino Royale 1967 version up for you next, and then we're going to check out You Only Live Twice 1967, but that one was a little bit later on in the year. And You Only Live Twice, if I'm not mistaken. Let me triple check here. Oh no, this is still with James Bond as Sean Connery. So I think that's his last one though, if I recall. Yeah, then we're gonna get the George Lazenby experiment, and then we're gonna switch to Roger Moore. So we got a lot of changes coming here. This will be fun to see how this all plays out. Anyway, I've talked long enough for this little mini. I hope you all have had a good time listening to these. Leave me a comment if you have an agreement or disagreement, etc. And as always, thanks for checking out the Fond Podcast. Friends occasionally not disagreeing. And as always, our little plug at the end here, we're available everywhere on social media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, all your favorite streaming podcast platforms, including Podcast Addict, Stitcher, Pandora, Audible, Amazon. You can even listen to us on Facebook, of course, on Spotify, and some others I'm probably forgetting in this little jingle here. Fondapodcast.com. You can check out and get yourself some merchandise. And also check out some more bios about the hosts and things of that nature. A couple exciting episodes coming up this summer as well. So that's it for me tonight, everyone. We'll see you all next time on another episode of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing.